pandemic. So maraming salamat po to all the Board of Trustees and the officers and members of PhilExport for continuously championing the interest of the exporters. And of course, our objectives are the same, and that is to boost our exports and to help our exporters start and grow their exports by also maximizing our ASEAN and ASEAN Plus FTAs. So, all right, so the focus of my presentation would be about market trends, opportunities and challenges in Australia and New Zealand. And I'll be sharing some updates about ANZFTA. Then we'll look at the market size and some trends and opportunities and trade statistics. And then to be followed by a discussion of the market challenges and imperatives. And then I'll wrap up the presentation with some tips for tapping the ANZFTA market. So what is the status of our relationship with ANZFTA? Currently, the status of our relationship is that we are still definitely in a relationship with ANZFTA, or with ASEAN, Australia, and New Zealand. And let's recall that in 2010, we made a decision to be in a relationship with them, and it was a comprehensive and a single undertaking FTA covering trade in goods, trade in services, movement of natural persons, investment, e-commerce, intellectual property, competition policy, and economic cooperation. Some of the provisions and benefits of the ANZFTA include increased market access through progressive elimination and reduction. And as of 2020, all of our merchandise exports, 100% po, are already enjoying 0% tariff. Other benefits are as stated in the areas of rules of origin, services, investment, and movement of natural persons. But an important thing to note is that the ANZFTA, just like any other relationship, is being reviewed and updated to make it more relevant for business. So the discussions on the upgrade negotiations has started and it's ongoing, and proposed elements such as restructuring existing chapters on services and investments, or incorporating new elements, or negotiating a chapter on MSMEs are some of the items that are being discussed. Let's move on and see how big is the Australian and New Zealand market. The market size, as you can see, is very small, of just about 30 million combined consumer base. However, Australia is the world's 12th largest economy in the world, with a GDP of 1.3 trillion and a GDP per capita of 54,000 US dollars. New Zealand, on the other hand, also belonged to the group of wealthy countries with a GDP per capita of 42,000 US dollars. Australia is a net exporter, and in 2020, the country exported 254,000 billion worth of goods to the world, while New Zealand exported 37,000 US dollar billion worth of goods to the world. As earlier mentioned, the market is very small, but amid the current uncertainties in the global economy, Australia and New Zealand, among developed economies, provide a favorable business environment given its resilient economy and excellent handling of the coronavirus pandemic. So what do we export to Australia and New Zealand? Our bilateral trade data show that we still have a lot of room for growth. Historically, the balance of trade has always been in favor of Australia and New Zealand, but this is not surprising given there's very small population versus our 100 million population. The products that they export are what I call, essential items for production. They are necessary to fuel our production and as raw materials for us to be able to produce products for export. In 2020, total bilateral trade with Australia was valued at 1.13 billion US dollars, with total exports of 357 million US dollars, while imports is 768 million US dollars. Top exports and imports are as indicated in the slide. In New Zealand, our total bilateral trade in 2020 was valued at 462 million US dollars, with total exports of 45.58 million US dollars, while imports is 416.84 million US dollars, resulting to a deficit of almost 371 million. Well, you can see here that our top exports to New Zealand are fresh and processed bananas, and some other items similar to what we export or import to Australia. Unfortunately, as well, over the past 5 years, our exports to both Australia and New Zealand has been declining. Likewise, our 9-year average of pre-ANZFTA total trade from 2001 to 2009 was at 9.92 billion. This figure has increased by almost 50% at 14.88 billion post-ANZFTA entry into force from 2010 to 2018. And while total trade has increased, our balance of trade based on the 9-year average pre and post-ANZFTA implementation has worsened from 2.50 billion to 6.33 billion. So this is actually one of our challenges and imperatives, no? How we could somehow rebalance trade, if at all possible, depending, of course, on our comparative advantages, our ability to expand our production capacities, and to find complementarities. So moving on, let's just look at some of the market characteristics, trends, and opportunities in Australia and New Zealand. So these two countries are almost siblings. They're very similar in many ways, but there are also some differences. And I'll be pointing out some similarities and differences where I can. But in general, I'll be talking more about Australia since it's the bigger market. As earlier mentioned, both countries are advanced economies with high purchasing power and a strong demand for high-value products. The citizens of both countries live in urban cities, but there is just a slight step back on this with COVID-19 as people realized that the work from home scenario is actually working and that moving to the countryside is now a viable option. So we are now seeing trends where offices are converted into residential buildings. The median age for Australia is 37.9 years old and 37.3 years old for New Zealand. So the demographic is not very young. So in fact, the population is aging and birth rate is declining for both countries. So you can take note of this and think of the opportunities given this characteristic. So when you think of aging population, what would be good are products that are good for the body, be it food or beauty products that could defy age, or services that could respond to the needs of older population. Australia also is a mass consumer society, meaning that the majority of the population enjoys the benefits of increased productivity and constantly are constantly expanding the range of consumer goods. However, the purchase decisions in Australia are also usually made with a price performance analysis. So just because they have high disposable incomes does not mean that they're not price conscious. Price, quality, and the image that the product projects are still major determinants when making purchase decisions. In both countries too, there's a preference for locally grown or locally made products. And just like in the Philippines with our Go Local project, the government, civil society, and business organizations support campaigns advocating for Australian-made or New Zealand-made products first and foremost. Both countries are also multicultural or multi-ethnic, so there is a diversity of people, choices, and preferences, which also means that there is an opportunity to cater to these diverse consumers. Relatedly, there is a big Filipino migrant population of about 300,000 in Australia and 40,000 in New Zealand. Therefore, there is a ready market for our traditional or ethnic products, which could extend to other nationalities with a similar taste profile as us. Fortunately for us also, there is an active group of Filipinos and other organizations in Australia and New Zealand that are helping to bring our products, ingredients, and cuisine to the mainstream market so that we are not just limited to the Filipino community, but could cross over to the wider Australian and New Zealand market. Also, an important thing to note is that both Australia and New Zealand are island nations. Australia in particular is an island, a country, and a continent. So according to them, there is no other country that can claim those things. So they have flora and fauna that is nowhere to be found anywhere else in the world. So they are very protective of their ecosystem. As a result, they have very strict biosecurity laws on certain imported goods, such as food and agricultural products. So ito po yung justification why they're saying that it's very hard or very difficult to access the market because they're very protective of their ecosystem because they're unique in a way. And this has been happening for many years already, even to their neighbors, like for instance, New Zealand. For the longest time, they're not able to export apples until such time when New Zealand filed a case in the WTO. So let's continue with some trends and more opportunities for Philippine exporters. Prior to COVID-19, Aussies and Kiwis are already very health conscious. But they became even more so because of COVID. So there is an increasing healthification trend, but also an interest on the provenance of goods. So where it's coming from, how is it produced, whether it's ethically sourced or sustainably produced. Likewise, there is an increasing focus on circular economy in an effort to reduce waste and promote sustainability. Retailers are also now more focused on increased personalization or customization, and private labeling offers them the opportunity to do so by offering them what they want or need, not just on a price point standpoint, but also making those products exclusive to their brick and mortar stores. There's also an increasing trend online. So as mentioned already by my colleagues, there's an increased digitalization, and I think this is uniform for all, and new technology developments catering to the new normal of online shopping, contactless deliveries, queuing apps, and the use of automated robots. As a result, there is going to be continued innovation and partnering with unlikely partners. So a great example of this is Uber. The traditional business of Uber is ride-hailing and ride-sharing business, but it has now expanded to many other services and partnerships, such as Uber Eats for food delivery, home and lifestyle retailers for packages or parcel deliveries, and partnership with sanitation companies to ensure that the sanitation and compliance of their fleet to COVID-19 protocols. So given all of this, what to export? So these are just some of the ideas also from the ITC trade map and as observed by us. For food, healthy, organic, natural, and fresh, there is an increasing trend on plant-based products. So the premium 7 products that we promote, the 4 C's, we could focus on the 4 C's, coconut, cacao, coffee, calamansi, and then further expand that to other agricultural products such as pineapple, banana, mango, and others. Also processed or preserved food such as bread, pastry, and biscuits. For home, living, and fashion, or HLF, as long as we're okay with here, but as long as it's ethically sourced, sustainable, and environmentally friendly. So usually products made of wood The Australians really like those type of products. For electronics, computer data storage, smart cards, office machines, and semiconductor devices. For automotive, static converters, wiring sets for vehicles, and electrical apparatus. So some challenges and imperatives. Some of these are items from a presentation by Dr. Shelito Habito when he was making the rounds of discussions for the AAC 2015. But I feel that this is still very much relevant at this time. So there's increased competition because of these FTAs with the reduced tariffs and reduced investment barriers. So it is important to find your strategic positioning in cross-border value chains. So the vision that you will have, the positioning, what are your advantages, comparative advantages. And then, of course, there are new laws and compliance processes, as mentioned a while ago. The biosecurity laws in Australia is very strict, and that's why it's very important to really research and look into it and ensure that you have all the certifications and follow the necessary protocols. Of course, MSMEs must gear up and change their ways. So the improvement of various business functions, and of course, to embrace digitalization, as already mentioned a while ago, and we could not, we could just again mention this over and over again because this is really very important, and it's no longer a question of should you do that, but how you should do it. And then also prepare your BCP, your business continuity plans for the next pandemic, because the next pandemic could just be around the corner. And then team up, collaborate, whether that be JVs, brand acquisitions, or other forms of partnerships. So to wrap this all up, just some tips or reminder tips for tapping the ANSPATA market. But I don't suppose for a moment that you don't know these things, but it's just good to be reminded to first and foremost, know your story, the basic of doing business. Know your story, be clear with your product offerings, and be ready with adequate information materials. Some of us would forget to update the company profile or the product offerings. Of course, research your market, know the guidelines, including the rules and specific legislation for each sector or industry that you wish to enter. And to a certain extent, we can help you with this. We can point you to some links and references that you could check. It is also important to check or be ready with your company's accreditations and certifications, or have one if it's needed. For instance, in Australia, they recently passed a new requirement about ethical certification, where suppliers are assessed based on the Corporate Social Responsibility Standard 2020, which features commitments and business practices in areas such as modern slavery, bribery, corruption, conflict, animal welfare, environment, and occupational health and safety. So more and more retailers and importers will be requiring certifications such as this. Another important thing to do is to assess your product's packaging and labeling and branding requirements, and be felt through social media and websites. So maximize the use of e-commerce and technology advancements. Nowadays, it would be a crime not to find you online, at the very least in online platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. Resource allocation is also very important. So ensure that you have funds and ready to invest. In the past, exporters would invest or allocate funds for joining trade fairs or missions. Nowadays, there are creative ways that can be done to reach your market virtually, but you need to be ready to invest time and resources as well. And lastly, build and maintain your contacts with embassies, trade offices, business chambers, and other business support organizations. So if there's a takeaway from this slide, ito po yung pinaka-importante. Reach out to us, connect with us, because we will be happy to assist you, of course, because our objectives are the same, and your success is also our success. So this concludes po my presentation, but this is not the end. I look forward to hearing from you during the discussion or Q&A portion, or if you have questions, and it will not be accommodated today, please email or reach out to us at the contact details indicated on the screen. Please also check our Facebook and Instagram pages at dti.sydney. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po, and let's make it happen in Australia and New Zealand.